Claude Code is faster than all of us. It is also wrong consistently. It writes tests that does not test anything, and it also claims things work when they clearly don't. But we can prevent all of these problems using the Superpowers plugin. In this video, I'm going to show you how Superpowers plugin works and how you can use it to build better products consistently without setting up a lot of manual processes by yourself. Let's get started. So, if you have been using Claude Code for a while, you've probably come across this problem. When you give Claude any prompts to implement something, it immediately jumps into implementation. It does not ask you any clarifying question, even if the prompt is super vague. And it also does not write tests out of the box. Even when you ask it to write tests manually, it sometimes writes tests that does not add any values to your product. And also, when you're in plan mode and you try to make some plan for your task, the plan that Claude generates generally is saved into its own memory, not into your code base, so you cannot reference that in any future session. So this creates this problem where if you try to use this knowledge into a future session, there's no way for you to reference that. And we can basically solve all of this problem using the Superpowers plugin. It basically works into a test-driven development. We call it TDD. So it's not a model or anything like that. It's just a methodology. It's sort of like a framework that makes your process of working with AI agents more consistent, and it does not go out of spiral. It first follows the test, and it writes the test, it verifies the test, and it also do its own review. And this plugin was created by Jesse Vincent and Prime Radiant. It's an open source plugin. You can go to GitHub and you'll be able to see these plugins in there. The code is available for everyone to see. And you can see it has almost 200,000 GitHub stars. So it's super popular and it's definitely safe for you to use. And it also works with Claude Code, Codex, Cursor, Gemini, OpenCode, and other coding tools that you may be using for your workflow. So, and when you use vanilla Claude Code, you immediately feel the changes that you are getting, right? So with vanilla Claude Code, it jumps into code, pass test by mocking, and it also does not verify its work. And it may sometimes, when you are basically trying to implement a new feature, it can break your existing features, and you are always basically in this state of paranoia because you are always distrusting the work that Claude is generating and thinking maybe it's breaking your existing feature. But with Superpowers, it's always the same process. It will always do the specs first. Basically, it will ask you a question to generate the specs, and then based on the specs, it will generate a plan, and based on the plan, it will do the test. It will utilize the subagents. It will also verify its work, and basically, since we are doing this TDD, your existing features will never break, because if they break, the test will fail. That means the agent cannot go out of spiral. You can always validate if a new change from Claude is breaking your existing feature just by executing the test. So that is much safer way to utilize Claude Code for your project, right? And you can install it directly by running this command, or you can go to GitHub to see other installation process for different coding tools. This is clearly written in here, right? You can go to Codex, you can install it there. You can install it in Gemini CLI. You can install it in OpenCode. But if you're in Claude Code, you can basically open your Claude Code and you can go to plugins and you can search for it saying Superpowers. And you can install it in your user scope, basically globally, or you can install in your repo scope, which I'm going to do, or you can, if you're on team plan, you can install it for your team as well. So I'm going to install it. It's going to install. It's just that easy. Official plugin as well from Anthropic. That's why it's super easy to install as well. And you can just reload your plugins and it automatically reload, right? So that's just easy. That is the process of installing it. It's super simple. So now let's look at how the Superpowers workflow actually works. I want to walk you through the issue of the process that will be happening every time you are using the Superpower plugins for any feature development, or maybe you're trying to fix a bug or anything like that for your project. So the first step of the workflow is brainstorm. Basically, when you give it a prompt, and if the prompt is vague, this step will happen. It will ask you a question. It will automatically trigger this ask user question tool to ask you a question. It already has these skills baked in. We'll look into the skills in a bit, but whenever you are giving it a prompt for a feature, this brainstorm workflow step will happen. It will ask you a lot of questions until it has all the context to work on that particular feature, right? So once it's asked you the question, gets all the context that is needed, it will generate a spec inside the docs folder in your repository. So it will basically create a specs.md that will reference all the things that it needs to do for this particular task, and it will ask you to review this, right? So that's a much better way. It will automatically basically documenting the spec that you're working on. And once that spec is verified by you and you give it the go ahead to continue to the next step, then the workflow step goes to the next step where it's planning. Based on the specs that you just approved, it will create a plan. It will create an implementation plan, and then it will put it into the docs folder as well, and it will ask you again to review the plan, right? And in this plan, it will break down the task, if it's a big task, into different subtasks so that it can utilize it in the next step, which is where we create different work tree. So the next step that comes after planning is the work tree. And in this step, it breaks down all of the tasks that is defined in the implementation plan into different work tree in the same Git repository so that it can work on them parallelly, right? And for each of these work tree, it triggers a subagents. So in each of these work tree, there will be a subagents who has that agent, and the work that this subagent will do is defined. It will not have access to the other files or the information that is gathered for the main task. It only has access to the information that is required for this subagents to perform the subtask. And the main agent is basically free in this case, right? Your main agent is working sort of like orchestrator. It's managing all these subagents. Since these subagents are working in the subtask, or its context window is very much smaller, as a result, you get better results, because the smaller the context window is, the more specific the task is, and the more specific the task is, the better result the LLM will produce. That's why subagents is a much better. Subagents always give you a much better results than using a main agent for all of your work, where your context window can get larger quickly if you're working on a bigger code base. So in each of these subagents in its own subtree will follow exactly the same process: TDD, red, green, and refactor. So initially it will write tests that will fail. It will not write anything, the test will fail, and then it will look at the test to understand what it needs to do in order for the test to pass. And once the test is passing, then it will basically refactor the test to make sure the code is clean and the tests are actually useful for your product, right? This is a better way of writing tests than mocking right away and writing tests based on the mock, rather than writing the test that is actually useful for your product. Once the task is done by the subagents, then it will enter into two-stage review process where two agents will review the output of the task, right? So first it will check the spec, and if it check, and it will try to see if the implementation is following the spec. If it does, then it will move into the other review process where it will check the overall quality of the code. So this is much better, right? You are not only verifying the spec, but also trying to see if the code quality matches the quality that you're expecting, right? So if that review passes, it moves on to the next step. Otherwise, we spin up another subagents and we try to fix the problem that it could not address. So we just basically give a fresh memory for new subagents, and that agents try to fix the problem that exists for this particular task. So after that review process is done, the final step is the final and the seventh step of this workflow is basically running the final verification. In this stage, it will basically run the test, it will run the build, it will also lint the code that it generated, and once that's done, it will basically then either merge it with the main work tree, or it can also create a peer that you can merge to your main branch, right? So once this verification is done, the end result is always a very concise and good quality code that you can basically don't have to worry about, and it also been verified by tests. So in the future, if you modify this particular feature, you can always run the test to make sure that, okay, this feature is not breaking, right? So this is like a way a senior engineer would approach their feature, and we are basically boxing it into a framework that is more consistent every time, right? So how does this actually working, right? So how is Superpowers plugin is actually managing all of these things? So it just have a lot of skills that is part of this process, and every time we are in this particular workflow step, it will just trigger those specific skills, and those skills actually controls all of these steps that we need to do for each of the workflow step. So we have brainstorming, writing plans, test-driven development, sub-agent-driven development, verification, request, code review. Basically, we're reviewing the code, and also how we are managing the Git work tree. Like how many work trees do you need actually for a particular task, right? If you go there, you can also see it here in Claude Code. If you write this /skills, you'll be able to see all the superpowers plugin, right? So if you write superpowers to filter it, I have other skills as well. You can see all of these skills are installed in your Claude Code project that it will utilize to actually follow this TDD process, right? So now let's look at superpowers in action. We're going to see how you can utilize it into a real project and how the working process actually happens in real time. So we have this project that we worked on a couple of videos ago. It's a AI agent marketplace. You can look at those videos that I did in the channel if you're interested. So we basically worked on how we can basically get this design with AI. Nothing is done by me, everything is done by AI. So for this project, it's a marketplace for AI agents, skills, and plugins. We already did the design, redesign, just to play with AI to share with you how we can utilize AI to build products like this. Definitely we can improve the design a lot, but this is done with like I think couple of iteration. We didn't do any modification or anything like that. So this is simply out of the box from the AI. So for this product, I want to create a blog page, sort of like a catalog of all the blogs, and I also want to create 10 blog posts so that it will explain to the user how AI agents works, what is AI agents, and also the marketplace of AI agents, and also how businesses can utilize AI in their businesses, right? So for this, I'm going to go to my repository. I'm going to exit out, and I'm going to give it a prompt. So for this skill, I'm going to give it a prompt. So for this, I'm going to say create blog page creator. And I'm going to reference the images in the public folder, saying use the images from this folder for all blogs. Blog this folder and create 10 blog posts about AI agents marketplace, and how businesses can utilize AI agents for their business. I'm not giving any other information. It is essentially sort of like a vague prompt, right? But I'm still going to go ahead and do it because I didn't tell it like what are the blog posts, what are layouts and stuff like that. So I'm just going to hit enter, and it should trigger Superpowers plugin. See, you're asking, do I want to use the Superpowers brainstorming plugin, which is like our first step, right? If you go back to the steps, so this is our brainstorming process. Like this is the first step that we need to execute on, and it's asking me like, do I want to use this skill for this step? And I'm going to go ahead and yes. And now you see it's just loaded the brainstorming skill, and now it's going to analyze the code base, analyze your prompt, and it will see if there is any vagueness. If there is anything that you need to ask, it will ask you the question, right? Like it's saying some question will involve visual choices, so I'd like to offer this. Some of what we're working on might be easier to explain if I can show it to you in a web browser. I can put together mocks, diagrams, layout comparisons as you go. The feature is still new. I'm going to say skip it. I don't want that much granularity. Skip it. Just give me the options in here. I don't want to complicate it and make the process slow, because if you open it into a browser, it makes increase your token usage, and also I don't want to spend that much time for here right now because I just want to show you the workflow. Okay, so it's asking me question 1, what level of routing do you want for the blog, because we didn't define any route. I'm going to go with option A, and then if it has any other question, it will gonna keep popping this question. Now it is asking me another question. I don't know why Claude is showing these weird characters. It's interesting. How should the blog listing page be laid out, right? Amazing. So it's asking me, we didn't define any layout. Again, I'm going to go with, I think grid is fine. Full width image, big title, remaining 9 in a 9-column card grid below. Alternating large page, text rows, okay. I think I'm going to again go with option A. it has another question. It's going to keep asking question until it's clear. So this is great, right? It's forcing you to think even if you're trying to be vague. So for the individual repositories page, what content style? Long form article, full article with multiple sections, subheadings, pull quotes, reading time estimate, rich editorial fill. Yeah, of course I want that fill. So I'm going to again go with sorry, I'm not going to go with option A. So it now has all the context that it needed, and it is now giving sort of like an overview, right? Like all the routes, what the title and the data layer, block page listing, style, design, all those things. So I'm going to go ahead and ask it to, and it's saying, does this design look right? Any changes before I add the spec? So it's again verifying, right? I'm going to say, go ahead and write the spec. Now it will write the spec in the docs folder. By the way, I do not know why we are seeing these weird characters. I think it's because of cursor may be having some issues, but once I highlight over them, you can see the characters correctly. So most likely a font issue. So I'm going to go ahead and continue. So it's showing me the preview of the spec that it's generating, and you can see it's trying to write it inside the docs/superpower/spec/ the file name, that is the today's date basically, and it's also giving me the overview. I'm going to just ask it to write it there. I can review it there. I'm going to show you once that's written there. So you can see Superpowers docs. I can go to preview and I can go here. So you can see this is the plan, right? Add a blog section to Skillforge with a listing page, individual post pages, contact focus on AI. It's also defining the route, blog/slug. It's also defining the types of those posts, 10 posts. It's also generating the title, AI agents, a plain English guide, the rise of agentic AI from chatbots to autonomous workers. It's also referencing the image that it should be using, how small businesses can cut cost with AI agents, automating your operations team with AI agents, stuff like that. And listing pages, rough design, header, main page, page section, 9 post grid, details page layout, backlink, hero image, article body, header integration, constraint. So if you, whenever you're reviewing this spec file, if you see something wrong, maybe it got some requirements wrong, you can always ask it to edit it before it jumps into the implementation plan. For now I think it's fine. I'm going to, and it's also trying to like commit it, right? I'm going to just let it commit so that it doesn't lose any work that it's doing. I also like this, by the way, like you don't have to manually commit it, it will automatically commit the changes. So it's saying spec committed to here, please review it and let me know if you want any changes before I start writing the implementation plan. I'm going to say I've reviewed it, it looks good. So now it will just move on to the next step, which is the planning step, writing the plan basically. And it's also triggering this Superpowers writing plans, right? It will use this skill to write the plan. So I'm going to hit yes, and it's loading that skill and it will gonna write the implementation plan. So it just generated this huge plan markdown. So I'm going to hit yes so that it can write inside the Superpower/plans. So if I look into this, it's a huge plan for this feature. Like almost everything is drilled out in here, and it's also showing the final verification flow, what it needs to check for final verification, and all the relevant information that is needed to implement this particular spec, right? So you can go through, review them, and if you see something is wrong, you can ask the agent to change them. And it's also now immediately changing the plans. I'm going to go ahead. So it's also doing the self-review. It's also doing self-review on the plan that it's generating, right? So it's very nice way to work on this. And it's also changing the code. I'm going to let it do that. So once it's happy with the plan and you're happy with the plan, you're not asking it to change the plan, it can just commit this step so that you don't lose the work. And then it's after the plan is done, so after you review the plan and the plan is complete, it's asking you for two options. You can either go for sub-agent driven development, or you can do inline execution. Inline execution will be much slower because you're only utilizing one main agent. But if you're using subagent, it will gonna create different work tree and it will do the work parallelly. So I'm going to go with option 1 is fine. So I'm going to go with subagent driven development, which is our step 4 basically. And for subagents, we'll also create the work tree that is in the workflow step 3. It's not prominent, but basically for subagents, we try to create the work tree for you. So it's loading loading the subagent driven development for this step. Each step is essentially a skill that it's needed for it to work on that particular steps that is related to that particular step. So I'm using subagent driven development. It's extracting the task and creating the task list from the plan that we have in the specs and the implementation plan. So it's now asking me to create the data for the blog post. So I'm going to hit enter and it's going to start creating those, right? So I'm going to shift to, I think, auto accept on so that it can automatically write the files. I don't need to approve them everything, so that it can go faster. And I've moved the terminal into the editor area, and that fixed the weird font issue that I was having. Most probably UTF was not being captured in the terminal, but now it's working fine. So you can see, right, the steps that we are talking about. The dispatching task on implementer agent create block data layer, that's committed. Now running spec reviewer, so it's reviewing the spec that it generated. So it's spin up the first agent, it is doing the task 1 spec review, that is in our step, right? So 2-stage review, it already wrote the test for it, the TDD was already done, so that's committed. And now it's reviewing the code. And then the second task is code quality review, it's doing that in here. After the spec was spec compliant, the implementation, now it's doing the overall code quality check, and both of them dispatching task to implementer. So that task is done, that implementation was done, it passed both reviewer. So now it's moving on to the next task and marking the first task as done. I'm going to, so you can see the steps, right? Like it's following exactly the same step that we have in the workflow every time. Like this is amazing because you don't need to worry about Claude forgetting a step, or every time you're running a new task, you know, like you're gonna get the exact same step. So I'm going to continue. I'm going to let this finish. So it's done working on all the 5 tasks. Now it's basically running the builds to make sure everything compiles correctly, and then it's triggering another skill, finishing a development branch, basically finishing whatever it's working on that sub work tree. It's now basically putting it over to the main tree. So it's loaded that skill and it's going to finalize the work. So it ran lint, it didn't write any test because it's just a blog post. Nothing significant to test in this particular implemented feature. But if you have like a complex implementation with the backend data source or maybe other things, it will definitely write the test plan. You can also explicitly ask it in the spec step to write the test, so that it writes the test by default. For a blog post, I don't think it's that critical to write test, so I think that's fine. And implementation is complete. Then it's asking like, should you merge back to main locally, create a PR, or keep the branch as is, stuff like that. So I'm going to just say merge to main locally, and it'll going to merge it to locally, and that will be the final step of our workflow, which you can see. You can basically merge it or create a PR, and the process is exactly always the same for this Superpowers plugin, which is like, this is why it's so useful for us basically. Yeah, there is a merge issue, but it automatically fixes it because it's very good at that. Claude is very good at git related operations, so don't worry about it. Just review it. Stashing, it's merging it to the main, and done. So this is the blog page that it generated. It's not looking bad, obviously, and it one-shotted it. Obviously, you have to always keep that in mind. You can always improve the design, but it created the hero article here, and also a grid with all the other articles, and it utilized all the images that we've added and asked it to use them. And you can click on to read articles. You go to the details page, We have to fix the nav, but that's not related to the work it did. It's a visual issue. So because we had this scroll related color change. So the design is nice, it's looking good. The hero section, details of the blog, quotes, stuff like that, and also link to related articles. So I think the result is not bad, but you've seen the workflow from start to finish with Superpowers plugin, and these steps remains the same for all the works that we'll be doing with Superpowers plugin. And so you've seen all the steps of Superpowers plugin, how it executes each step for the workflow to implement a particular feature. And one of the downsides of Superpowers plugin that you should be aware of is basically it's much slower than normal process because it goes through these 7 steps every time asking it to implement something, and it's also as a result of that use more tokens, and it's also very opinionated. Your team may not follow TDD, they may follow other steps, and also it can over trigger. Like for example, maybe you have a very simple task where you don't need to go through 7 steps, but sometimes it can trigger itself just because for the simple flow. Maybe you just want to update the URL of an image. You don't need to go to 7 steps to verify that, right? So just be aware of that. But when you're working on a bigger features, make sure to use a Superpowers plugin, and that will make your process much more robust and make your code much better quality, and as well as give you a peace of mind because you're following TDD, and it will not break your other features. So definitely, if you have a bigger feature, utilize Superpowers plugin. And if you're working on a small feature, you can also disable it if you want to, or you can even uninstall it if you want to. So definitely try to use that. And that is it for today's video. I'm going to be back with other videos related to Claude, but if you like this video, make sure to leave a like and let me know if you are using Superpowers plugin in a different way and how it's working for you in the comment section, and I'll see you in the next video.